Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that settled over her as she drove down the winding road leading to her new home. The old Victorian house loomed ahead, its once vibrant paint peeling and faded. The landscape was beautifully desolate, with wildflowers blooming in the overgrown garden. It felt like stepping into a different era, one that whispered secrets of the past. After inheriting the house from her late grandmother, Sarah had envisioned a fresh start. She wanted to escape the heartbreak of her recent breakup and find solace in the tranquility of small-town life. Yet, as she parked her car and stepped onto the creaky porch, a shiver ran down her spine. The interior was filled with dust and the scent of old wood. Cobwebs hung in the corners like remnants of forgotten dreams. She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the melancholy that permeated the air. As she unpacked her boxes, she could hear the occasional creaks of the house settling, but something else lingered just beneath the surface. A whisper, faint yet persistent. "Sarah." The voice echoed in her mind, but she shrugged it off, convincing herself it was merely the wind. As night fell, she settled into her new bedroom, the moonlight streaming through the cracked window. She felt exhausted, ready to drift into sleep. But the whisper returned, this time more urgent. "Sarah." She bolted upright, heart racing. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. Silence enveloped her, pressing against her chest. With a shiver, she turned off the light, trying to dismiss the eerie feeling creeping over her. Days passed and Sarah grew accustomed to the whispers, believing it was just her mind playing tricks on her. She immersed herself in decorating the house, filling it with warmth and personal touches. However, the whispers only grew stronger, echoing through the halls, sometimes sounding like giggles, other times like distant cries. One evening, while unpacking boxes in the living room, Sarah stumbled upon an old photo album hidden in the attic. Dust danced in the air as she opened it, revealing pictures of a family that once lived in the house. Among them was a little girl with wide, innocent eyes and a sweet smile. Emily. Something about her resonated with Sarah, as if she were staring into a mirror reflecting her own childhood. The resemblance was uncanny, and a strange connection tugged at her heart. As she flipped through the pages, the whispers became more frantic, urging her to pay attention. "Find me." The atmosphere grew heavy and the temperature in the room dropped. Sarah shivered, realizing that the voice was no longer just a whisper, it was a plea. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Heart pounding, she rushed towards the sound, only to find her grandmother's china scattered across the floor. "Was that you?" She whispered into the silence, feeling a chill run down her spine. Just then, the air thickened with a sense of sorrow. It was as if the house itself was mourning. Determined to uncover the mystery, Sarah began researching the history of the house and its previous occupants. She visited the local library and dug through archives, searching for clues. After days of relentless pursuit, she discovered a tragic tale. Emily had vanished one stormy night, and her mother, Margaret, had succumbed to madness in her search. That night, Sarah felt an overwhelming compulsion to return to the attic. As she climbed the creaky stairs, the whispers intensified, wrapping around her like a shroud. "Help me," echoed in her mind, a heartbreaking plea that ignited a fire within her. The attic was dimly lit, shadows dancing against the walls. In a corner, she found a small wooden chest. With trembling hands, she opened it to reveal a collection of Emily's belongings: toys, drawings, and a delicate locket containing a picture of her and her mother. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she clutched the locket, feeling a profound connection to the lost girl. "Emily, I'm here," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "I won't let you be forgotten." As if responding to her words, the temperature dropped further, and the whispers morphed into anguished cries. Sarah felt an overwhelming sadness wash over her. "What happened to you?" she cried out, hoping to make contact with the spirit that lingered in the shadows. Over the next few days, Sarah became increasingly obsessed with Emily's story. The whispers haunted her, pulling her deeper into the mystery. She often found herself wandering the halls at night, searching for any sign of Emily. But the more she searched, the more the house seemed to consume her. Sarah began experiencing vivid nightmares, each one more terrifying than the last. In her dreams, she saw flashes of Emily's final moments, An empty room, a child's laughter, and then silence. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, the echoes of the past haunting her waking moments. During one particularly restless night, she decided to hold a seance in hopes of contacting Emily. She set up candles and gathered her belongings from the attic. With David by her side for support, she prepared to face the unknown. As they sat together in the dimly lit living room, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and dread. "If you're here, Emily, please let us know," she whispered, heart racing. The candles flickered as a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing them. "Is someone there?" David asked, his voice steady but filled with tension. Just then, the whispers erupted around them, a cacophony of sorrow and despair. "Help me! Help me!" they cried, echoing off the walls. The room trembled, and a cold breeze enveloped them. Suddenly, an object flew off the shelf, crashing to the ground. Sarah and David exchanged terrified glances, and as if responding to their fear, the whispers transformed into a chilling wail. "Leave! Leave!" they screamed, reverberating through the house, filling Sarah with an overwhelming sense of dread. The next day, Sarah sought out Mrs. Henderson to learn more about Margaret and Emily. As she arrived at the neighbor's house, she found the elderly woman sitting on her porch, knitting. "Mrs. Henderson, can you tell me more about Emily and her mother?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Mrs. Henderson sighed, her eyes clouded with sorrow. "Margaret was a loving mother, but after Emily disappeared, she fell into despair. They say the house is cursed. It holds the memories of their pain." "What do you mean?" Sarah pressed, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "Many believe that Emily's spirit lingers here, unable to find peace. She was a bright child, and her loss devastated Margaret. Some say she still searches for her daughter." Feeling a surge of compassion, Sarah resolved to help Emily find peace. That night, armed with the knowledge she had gained, she prepared for another seance, determined to confront the spirit of Margaret. As Sarah and David sat in the dimly lit living room, she felt a mix of fear and determination. "I need to know the truth," she whispered, feeling the presence of the spirits around her. "Margaret, if you're here, please listen." A sudden chill filled the room, and the whispers turned into anguished cries. "Margaret, let go. Your daughter needs you to move on," Sarah shouted, desperation lacing her voice. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and a figure materialized before them. It was Margaret, her face twisted with sorrow. "You don't understand," she wailed, reaching out toward Sarah. "I can't let her go." The confrontation with Margaret's spirit intensified. Sarah felt the weight of grief and regret radiating from the apparition, a powerful reminder of the love that had turned to madness. "Margaret, your pain is real, but Emily is waiting for you. She needs you to let her go," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Margaret's expression shifted, the anger slowly replaced by sorrow. "I couldn't protect her," she whispered, her voice filled with despair. "I failed her." "No, you didn't fail her. You loved her. That's what matters," Sarah said, her heart breaking for the lost mother. "You need to find peace. Emily wants you to be happy again." In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. The whispers turned into soft, melodic lullabies, echoing the love that had once filled the home. Margaret's expression softened, and she began to fade, her form shimmering like smoke in the air. "Thank you," she whispered, the words fading into the night. The house, once heavy with sorrow, felt lighter, filled with warmth and love. As dawn broke, Sarah stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows. The air was peaceful, the whispers now a gentle breeze. She knew she had helped Emily find her way home, and in doing so had found her own healing. When Mark received the news of his great-aunt's passing, he felt a strange mix of emotions. He hadn't seen her in years, but her house had always been a part of family lore, rumored to be haunted by the spirits of its past occupants. Now, it was his responsibility to sort through her belongings and prepare the home for sale. The house stood at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to whisper secrets. Mark parked his car and stepped out. taking a deep breath as he approached the front door. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, but he brushed it off as nerves. As he stepped inside, the musty scent of old wood and dust filled his lungs. The living room was filled with antique furniture, covered in white sheets, as if they were ghosts waiting to be uncovered. Mark felt an inexplicable pull towards a large, ornate mirror that hung above the fireplace, its surface gleaming despite the dust. Mark felt an eerie compulsion to stand in front of the mirror. As he gazed into its depths, he was struck by a vision, a glimpse of a young girl, no more than 8 years old, with hauntingly sad eyes. She seemed to reach out to him, her mouth moving silently as if trying to communicate. "Who are you?" Mark whispered, heart racing. The image faded, replaced by his own reflection, but he felt a chill creep over him, as if the girl's spirit lingered in the room. The following days were filled with odd occurrences. Shadows danced along the walls, and whispers echoed in the silence. Mark often found himself drawn to the mirror, where the girl's visage would reappear, growing clearer each time. He felt a deep connection to her, sensing her pain and sadness. That night, as he prepared for bed, he heard a soft voice calling his name. "Mark." Startled, he jumped out of bed, following the sound to the mirror. The girl appeared again, her expression pleading. "Help me," she mouthed, her eyes filled with desperation. Determined to uncover the mystery behind the girl's spirit, Mark began searching through his great-aunt's belongings. In the attic, he discovered old journals filled with stories of the house and its previous residents. One entry caught his eye, a tale of a family that had once lived there, a tragic accident that had taken the girl's life. He learned that the girl, named Emily, had drowned in a nearby lake under mysterious circumstances. Her mother, devastated by the loss, had spent years trying to communicate with her spirit. Mark felt a surge of empathy for both the girl and her mother, understanding the weight of grief that hung over the house. That night, Mark returned to the mirror, ready to confront Emily's spirit. "I know your story," he said softly. "I want to help you find peace." The mirror began to shimmer, and Emily's reflection appeared once more. "You must find my mother," she urged, her voice barely a whisper. "She's still here, trapped." Fueled by determination, Mark began to search for clues about Emily's mother. He visited the local library, poring over newspapers and records. He discovered that Emily's mother had also died tragically shortly after the girl, consumed by grief and guilt. As he delved deeper, Mark found an old newspaper article detailing the lake where Emily had drowned. It spoke of a memorial service held for both mother and daughter. The realization hit him like a cold wave. Emily's mother's spirit was still tied to the house, waiting for closure. One night, as he stood before the mirror, he felt the energy shift. "I found your mother, Emily," he said, determination coursing through him. "She's waiting for you." The mirror began to ripple, and Emily's face transformed into one of hope. "Please help us," she cried, and Mark felt a surge of emotion. Mark decided to hold a seance, inviting a local medium to assist him in reaching out to Emily's mother. As they gathered in front of the mirror, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Candles flickered, casting shadows across the room as Mark felt the weight of the spirits surrounding him. "Emily, if you can hear us, please come forward," the medium called. The room grew cold, and the mirror shimmered as Emily's spirit appeared, this time accompanied by a faint shadow. Her mother. "Mother," Emily cried, reaching out. The room filled with a mixture of grief and love, the spirits connecting for the first time in decades. "Forgive me, my dear," the mother's voice trembled. "I couldn't save you." "You never failed me," Emily replied, tears streaming down her ethereal face. "We can be together again." Mark watched, heart racing as the two spirits embraced, the air heavy with emotion. As they merged into a radiant light, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The heaviness that had once enveloped it was gone, replaced by a sense of tranquility. Mark stood before the mirror, gazing at his reflection, feeling a profound connection to the spirits that had lingered. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered, knowing he had helped her find closure. As he prepared to leave the house for the last time, he took one last look at the mirror, its surface now clear and serene. "Goodbye," he said, feeling the warmth of the spirits surrounding him. As he stepped outside, he felt a lightness in his heart, knowing he had been part of something beautiful, a reunion that transcended life and death. Julia had always been fascinated by her grandmother's stories of the old family home, a sprawling mansion that had stood for generations. When she inherited the property after her grandmother's passing, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The house was located at the edge of a dense forest, surrounded by towering trees that whispered in the wind. As she approached, the grandeur of the mansion loomed before her, its once bright facade faded and weathered. Julia parked her car and stepped onto the creaking porch, a sense of foreboding settling over her. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. Julia wandered through the rooms, taking in the antique furniture and faded photographs, but something felt off, an unsettling energy that lingered in the corners. As she explored, she heard a soft rustling sound, like whispers echoing through the halls. "Hello?" she called out, but only silence answered her. Shaking off the unease, she settled in for the night, determined to honor her grandmother's legacy. That first night, Julia was restless. The house creaked and groaned, each sound echoing in the stillness. As she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows danced on the walls and the wind howled outside, creating an eerie symphony. Suddenly, she heard it. A soft tapping, like fingernails against wood. "What was that?" she whispered to herself, her heart racing. The tapping grew louder, and she felt an overwhelming urge to investigate. With trepidation, Julia climbed out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway. The tapping led her to a door at the end of the corridor, one she had not noticed before. Hesitant but curious, she reached for the doorknob and turned it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened room filled with shadows. As she stepped inside, the air grew colder, and she felt a chill run down her spine. The tapping continued, now accompanied by a low, melodic humming that resonated in her bones. Inside the room, Julia discovered an old, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. The surface shimmered, reflecting the dim light like a portal to another world. She approached cautiously, drawn to the mirror's strange beauty. As she gazed into it, the humming grew louder, and she caught a glimpse of a figure standing behind her, a tall, shadowy figure with dark eyes and a sinister smile. Startled, she turned, but there was nothing there. Julia's heart raced as she realized she was not alone. That night, the visits continued. Each time, the figure appeared in the mirror, its presence growing more defined. Julia felt a mix of fear and curiosity, wanting to understand the nature of this entity. Determined to confront it, she began researching the history of the house. She learned about a tragic love story that had unfolded within its walls, a tale of betrayal and revenge that had left a dark stain on the mansion's legacy. As Julia delved deeper into the history of her family, she discovered that the figure in the mirror was the spirit of a man named Thomas, who had been wronged by a former owner of the house. He had lost everything he loved, and his spirit lingered, seeking vengeance and resolution. Julia felt a strange connection to Thomas, as if his pain resonated with her own experiences. She understood the weight of loss and betrayal, and she felt compelled to help him find peace. One night, as she stood before the mirror, she called out to Thomas, "I know you're here. I want to help you." The humming stopped, and the shadowy figure appeared, its expression shifting from anger to sorrow. "Help me find her," Thomas whispered, his voice echoing through the room. "She is the key to my freedom." Julia dedicated herself to uncovering the truth about Thomas's lost love. She spent hours in the local library, poring over old records and newspaper clippings. Eventually, she discovered that Thomas's love had been betrayed by her own family, forced to leave the house in shame. Armed with this knowledge, Julia returned to the mansion, determined to confront the past. She stood before the mirror once more and called out to Thomas. "I found her. She was betrayed, but she loved you." The air crackled with energy, and the mirror shimmered as Thomas's spirit appeared, filled with emotion. "Can she forgive me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Together, we can set things right," Julia replied, her heart racing with purpose. With newfound determination, Julia decided to perform a ritual to connect Thomas's spirit with that of his lost love. She gathered candles, flowers, and old family heirlooms, creating a sacred space in front of the mirror. As the ritual began, the atmosphere shifted. Julia felt a powerful energy surrounding her, pulling her deeper into the connection between the past and present. The shadows danced, and suddenly, the room was filled with ethereal light. "Thomas," she called out, and the figure of his lost love began to materialize beside him. "You were not to blame." Tears streamed down Julia's face as the spirits embraced, their pain merging into a brilliant light that filled the room. In that moment, Julia felt a sense of peace wash over her, knowing that she had helped them find closure. The next morning, the mansion felt different. Lighter, as if the weight of the past had finally lifted. Julia stood before the mirror, gazing at her reflection. The shadows were gone, replaced by warmth and light. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispered, knowing that she had played a part in healing the wounds of the past. As she prepared to leave the mansion for the last time, she felt a sense of purpose wash over her. As she drove away, Julia glanced back at the old house, a smile on her face. It was no longer just a family heirloom. It had become a symbol of resilience and healing. The stories of the past would live on, intertwined with the love and light she had helped restore.